even when you're scared, do it anyway. Pretend to be your future self. Act like the you want to be. And before you know it, you are actually that person. The lines between who you are now and who you want to be have faded because you're already acting like them. Hello, my friends. Welcome to It's All Magic. I am your guide, your host, and your friend, Devin Hine. And here we'll be discussing how to make your life truly feel like magic. I believe that our very existence on Earth is nothing less than a miracle, and that we all have so much potential to learn, to grow, to experience, and to create during our short time here. It is both my passion and my pleasure to walk this path of life optimization by your side, where we'll discuss topics like passion, purpose, intuition, manifestation, physical well-being, and much, much more. I'm a yoga teacher, a meditation and breathwork facilitator, and a national board certified health and wellness coach. But more importantly, I am an eternal optimist, a lover of life, and a forever student. It is my hope that with each and every episode, you too will finally start to believe it really is all magic after all. Ready to dive in? Let's do it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of It's All Magic. I'm here. You're here. That's all we need. I am feeling thrilled about today's topic. I say that every week, but I really mean it every week. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice that my background is different. That is because I'm actually visiting my parents in Huntington, West Virginia right now. And it is honestly beautiful outside. I say beautiful. And by beautiful, it is a little overcast and moody. And the leaves are starting to change colors. And I feel like I'm in this perfect, incredible, impeccable autumn movie. I was going for a walk this morning and there are tons of gorgeous like brick houses here. And I felt like I was in Practical Magic or something like that. So it's really, really cool being here because it's very different from the climate we have in California. So I'm soaking up the autumn energy. I'm soaking up all the energy from my parents and just loving every moment that I get to spend with them. I have always been extremely close to my family, my parents, my sister, and not getting to live near them by a long shot is really, really hard. So every second that I can be with them is absolutely precious and magical. So with that, I will let you know what we will be discussing today. So there's a reason that my husband Cal and I are visiting Huntington right now. That reason is that my beloved mother, Elise Smith, has just put on this incredible, what she calls Women Warriors Summit. So it's essentially a conference for 750 women, both Appalachian women, but also women from all over the country who came in a few days ago. And we heard incredible speakers. There was a panel that we got to learn from, all of these women with their unique stories and experiences. We were learning mainly the theme of how to have crucial conversations. So Crucial Conversations is an organization, but it's also a book. And it's essentially, a conversation that is really hard to have. Maybe it's highly emotional. The stakes are high. You disagree with the person that you're about to have the conversation with, but it's the kind of conversation we all have to have in life. It's the conversation that you have to have with your boss when you're trying to negotiate for a higher salary. It's the conversation that you have to have with your uncle who you always get into arguments about politics with. These conversations are so important for us all to know, both for our careers and for our personal lives. And so my mom chose for this inaugural Women Warriors Summit to be all about having courageous, crucial conversations. So that was the general theme. But as I mentioned, there was a lot of different just a lot going on. We had panels, we had breakout rooms, we had delicious lunches, we had networking sessions. It was so mind-blowing how amazing it turned out to be. And I'm really, really proud of my mom because, only a few years ago, she was going through kind of a rut, feeling lost, feeling unsure of what she wanted to do, how she could serve the world and give back. And, she had been a stay-at-home mom for many years. Originally, she had started her career as an attorney, and she was a kick-butt lawyer for, I believe, 16 years. And then she ended up staying home with my sister and I, which was the absolute greatest gift in the world. But by the time we had left the nest, she was hitting that phase that I think many parents hit of, now what? Who am I? What do I do? How do I spend my time? And so it's amazing having watched that whole journey to now, where she one day had this random dream or vision of having this huge conference with women from all over the country, having really incredible, powerful keynote speakers, panelists, breakout sessions, and it just happened. So I am beyond proud of my mom. So it was on October 6th. So this is just a few days after at the time of recording. And I want to walk you through, first of all, what the event was like, but also some of the nuggets of wisdom that I took away from these powerhouse women. When I say powerhouse women, I mean you could feel just the energy in the room. It was buzzing. It felt like the arena was alive because seeing these women up on stage all together, women from all walks of life and careers and ethnicities. And when they were up there, I mean, the arena was silent. You could hear a pin drop because we were all ears, literally. So I want to share with you some of the lessons that I took away and just inspire you, because I walked away incredibly inspired, and I feel that I am here to share what I experience with you all so that we can both really feel like life is all magic. Had to say it. So with that, I will dive in to session number 1. So the first session was the Crucial Conversations expert on stage. So Emily Gregory, she was one of the co-writers of Crucial Conversations and one of the co-founders of the organization. And she gave a really dynamic, engaging talk on Crucial Conversations. She was showing YouTube videos, she was walking around the stage, she was making us laugh. So it was really, really fascinating. But I also learned how to have these kinds of hard conversations. So the first thing that she wanted to clarify is that empathy does not have to mean dishonesty. So she showed us this really funny video of these children. And this was actually, I think, a high school student's science project. So she brought in all of these kids. They were probably 6 or so years old. And she gave them 2 types of brownies. Now, one of the brownies was just bought from the store. And she had that listed so that the viewer could see. The other brownie, she purposefully made disgusting. So instead of putting sugar in, she put salt in, and a lot of salt. But here's the kicker. She told all of the kids that this was actually her dead grandmother's recipe that had been passed down through the generations. Okay, so she sits each kid down. She gives them the first brownie, the one that is bought from the store. Then the second brownie, the one that is her grandmother's recipe. And she asks them, which one did you prefer? And every single kid, I kid you not, even as they had that disgusted, gross look on their face, like they could barely choke down her salt brownies, they would point to the salt brownies as their favorite one. And so this video is incredibly impactful because it showed us that from such a young age, we are bred to be people pleasers. We're bred to be empathetic, and empathy is a necessary ingredient for life and being kind. But there is still that line that can be drawn in the sand where empathy does not have to equal dishonesty. In that video, after she had shown it, the speaker, Emily Gregory, said, okay, so what did all the kids do? And of course, in the audience were shouting, people please. They told her that they liked grandma's recipe because it meant something to her. And Emily said, no, they were not people pleasing. They were not doing X, Y, and Z. They lied. They were all liars. And she said that to really drill down the point that sure, they were trying to be kind. They were trying to be nice. But at the end of the day, it's not nice to lie that blatantly. I mean, granted, for a brownie recipe, the stakes are not that high. It doesn't matter that much. But she was using this to show that there are times in life, many, many moments in life, where we have to just tuck her up, put on our game face, find the courage, and have the conversation, even if it is terrifying. Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually said one time that you should always speak your voice, even if your voice shakes. And I felt like that was kind of the theme of this entire day. So knowing about this, about the fact that empathy doesn't have to equal honesty or dishonesty, she also said before diving in, if you don't talk it out, you will act it out. So right now, as you're listening to this, if you can think of a conversation that you have been putting off having, maybe it's a conversation with a coworker or your boss or a friend or a family member, whatever it may be, something that's maybe bothered you that you'd like to talk out, or something that isn't going great in the relationship that you should really process together, I want you to remember that if you don't have the conversation, you will end up acting it out. And we've all been there. I mean, we have. Imagine, you and your partner are having kind of an off day and you're just not on the same page and you're bickering right and left. If there's something that you have not been expressing fully, something that has been bothering you and just kind of simmering in the background, that might be one of the reasons why you keep bickering. Everything about them is annoying you on this day. Things are just not working out because you have not expressed your truth. So remember this. If you don't talk it out, you will act it out. So with that in mind, she gave us some really helpful tips on how to start these conversations. Because I feel like the beginning of these conversations is always the hardest. It's that question of, how do I even transition into this part of the conversation? Or how do I open up the conversation in a way that doesn't make the other person completely shut down and become defensive? If you want it to be a safe space where you create dialogue back and forth, you have to be really intentional about how you kick it off. So she recommended doing what she calls framing the conversation. So when you frame the conversation, you're essentially letting the other person know more or less that something is about to go down. And of course, it doesn't have to be negative, but you're letting them know that you are about to embark on a really important conversation. Maybe it's a heavy topic, just something difficult to discuss, and you are giving them a moment to mentally prepare. So she gave us a few tips for framing conversations. So the first that she wants you to think of is, what is the intent of the dialogue? Okay, the intent of the courageous conversation. Is it to find a mutual truth between the two of you? Is it to discover some sort of win-win situation? Is it to learn something? Is it to strengthen a relationship? Really ask yourself, what is my intention for this conversation? Because we've all been there where maybe something's bothering you and you bring it up, but you're not really clear on what you want out of that conversation, and it ends up just derailed and going on tangents, and you're bickering back and forth, and it ends nowhere because you're not clear on your goal. You don't even know the destination of the journey you're on. So get very clear about the intent of the dialogue. So number 1 is focus on what you really want. And it's not just what you want, but it's what do you really want for the other party? What do you want for you? What do you want for your organization, for your relationship together? Whatever it is, get really, really clear on that so that you know what you want for yourself and for the other person in this conversation. Because remember, a dialogue means 2 people are talking. It's not just about you, but it's also not just about the other person. Maybe it is about finding some sort of win-win situation or gaining clarity on something that you've been uncertain about or bothered by. So that is tip number 1, focus on what you really want. Tip number 2 is share your good intent. So if you don't want the other party to get all defensive on you, make sure you know or let them know that you are not there to come at them, to attack them, to threaten them in any way. In fact, you're both just fellow human beings that are about to have a conversation about something really important, whatever it may be. So when you share your good intent, it could be something like, I really value this relationship and I want this to work. That's why I'd like to share a concern with you. So if you share it like that, the other person is instantly going to say, oh, well, I care about this relationship. I want it to work too. So they instantly kind of have buy-in, or you have buy-in from them, I should say, because they more likely than not will want the same thing. Or even if it's you and your boss and you say something along the lines of, hey, I really want our team to be successful and I care about, my productivity within our team and within our company. So I really wanted to talk to you about X, Y, and Z. If you frame it in a way where the other person is going to see that they don't have to be on the defensive, then you're going in creating that safe space. So tip number 3 for framing the conversation is contrast to fix misunderstandings. So for example, if you say something to someone and they do get a little defensive and they say, oh, don't worry about what my team is doing. You should worry about your own team. You could instantly use this tip, which is contrast to fix misunderstandings, by saying, oh, no, Devin, I don't intend to put your team down. I actually think your team's work is amazing. What I intended to do was to make sure that your team will have enough time to finish this project. I was genuinely worried that it wouldn't be a long enough timeline for you. And so if you can clarify, oh, no, I didn't intend to, or I don't intend to, but I do intend to, that will help you both be on the same page. Because even when you go in setting up that safe space, there are still times where the other person is not going to feel safe. So do everything you can when framing the conversation to really make sure that both parties feel comfortable and open about the conversation that is about to happen. So those are the 3 tips for framing the conversation. So quick reminder, the first, focus on what you really want for yourself, for the other party, and maybe for your joint relationship, for your company, for your team, whatever it may be. The second, share your good intent. I really care about you and I want this to work. That's why I'd love to share blah, blah, blah. And the third would be contrast to fix misunderstandings. So share what you don't intend to do and then share what you do intend to do in that conversation. So framing the conversation will kick you off into a healthy start to your crucial conversation. Then how do you have the crucial conversation, you may ask? Haha, I shall tell you. So they taught us a really, really helpful three-part framework, you could say, for having these kinds of conversations. So the first is share facts. So facts are the objective truths of what happened or what is happening. The second is share your story. So your story means you're using I statements. It's often about your feeling or what kinds of concerns you have. And the third is ask. So you're asking maybe how they feel about it, or how do you view this, or what is your take on the situation? So when you ask, first of all, it shows humility, that you're not there just to blabber on about your truth and make this a monologue. You're opening it up for a dialogue, for the other person to speak as well. You're curious about what they have to say, and that alone will make them feel valued and heard and seen. If you're actually asking and then actually listening, that's important. So let's go through a quick example. So in this share your facts, share your story, asks for other paths. Let's imagine, we were given an example in our breakout rooms of a boss who was consistently giving this one team completely unrealistic timelines for their projects. And it's happened 4 times already. And every time, either the team completely burned out in order to get the project turned in on time, or they missed the deadline. So the situation is this: your boss gives you, who is on this team, yet another unrealistic timeline for a project. It's time to have the crucial conversation. So after you have framed the conversation and you've said something along the lines of, hey, Tom, I really, really care about this project. I want it to be extremely high quality because I think it'll have a really incredible impact in, what our team is trying to do. And because of that, I wanted to share some concerns with you. Okay, this is where you go to your facts. The last 4 times you've given my team a deadline for a project, we've either had to burn ourselves out and create this low morale on the team just to get the project in, or we've missed deadlines, which happened on 2 occasions. Okay, so that's your facts. Go to your stories. This is making me really concerned, both for my team's morale, but also for the quality of our projects. I'm worried that the timelines you're giving me are showing that this company is more concerned about quantity over quality, and everyone on my team really wants this to be their best work. Okay, then you go to your ask. How do you feel about this? Or whatever it may be. So that is how you frame your conversation. You share your facts, you share your story, and then you ask. So that was more or less the general framework for crucial conversations. If this is a topic you're interested in, I highly invite you to read the book or even just look on their website, see what the organization offers. I know my mom has gone to some of their trainings. She's read the book multiple times, as a lawyer and mediator, having these kinds of courageous conversations, using your voice, hearing the other side. It's really important to her. And so this has been something that she has honestly studied for a while. So this was my first, take or glance into this kind of topic, but I really enjoyed it. And I know me and all of the other, 750 attendees got a lot out of it. So I really hope that was helpful. So moving on, after we had that conversation or that talk with Emily Gregory and we had our breakout rooms, we then had a delicious lunch/networking session, and then we moved into the panel. So for the panel, it was my incredible mother and 4 other powerhouse women that she had chosen out of many that honestly had applied. She had done interviews and she chose these women because she knew they had real stories to share about the courageous conversations they'd had to have in their lives, in their careers. So on this panel, we had the following. We had, as I mentioned, my mother, Elise Smith, who is the First Lady of Marshall University here in Huntington, West Virginia. She is also co-founder of Wing to Wing Foundation with my beloved father, Brad Smith. She is a former lawyer, mediator, still a mother and wife, and she also obviously, is the founder, the creator, the CEO, the head architect of the Women Warriors Summit, which she hopes will be a yearly adventure. So that was panelist number 1. We also had Christina Johnson, who was previously Undersecretary of Energy under President Barack Obama. And then she was also a former Ohio State president. She has done many, many things in her career, as have most of these women, but she was panelist number 2. Panelist number 3 was Brandy Jacobs-Jones, who is the Senior Vice President of Operations at Marshall University. So the university where my dad is president and my mom is First Lady. And she also had incredible nuggets to share, which we will get to. Panelist number 4 was Jessica Kern-Huff, who is currently a high school women's basketball coach, but she was previously the Tennessee State women's basketball coach. And I'll also mention that her husband is Marshall University's football coach. So they are the coaching family, and they're fantastic. And then our 5th panelist is Shelley Archambault, who is a Fortune 500 board director, a former CEO, an author, a speaker, wearing many hats, as do most of these women. So all of these women, as I've mentioned, came from extremely different walks of life, different upbringings, different religions, different cultures, ethnicities, and they all had so much to share. And I'll also say what's interesting as I'm thinking about it right now and processing in the moment, even though they shared different nuggets of wisdom, at the end of the day, when you put them all side by side, you realize that the takeaway messages are the same time and time again. I would say the takeaway already, before I dive into what each has shared, is don't shrink yourself, as Jessica Kern-Huff said. Use your voice empathetically and in a kind way, but still use your voice. Be courageous, be confident, even if you have to fake it. And also, as Jessica Kern-Huff said, do it scared. So even if you are terrified, do it anyway. So those were kind of the takeaways that you heard over and over again. But I wanted to share maybe 1 or 2 things from each powerhouse woman. So something that my mom had shared was, she was asked the question about, what kinds of courageous conversations, crucial conversations have you had in your life, and how have they impacted your life? And she said, honestly, the hardest crucial conversations I've had to have been the conversations that I had with myself. So she was telling the story of when her and my dad had to decide if they were willing to move all the way from California, where they had built a home and a life and a career for 20 years, move across the country to Huntington, West Virginia, to begin as president and first lady of a university. My mom is not from here, my dad is, but it hadn't previously been her home, so it was going to be completely new to her. She didn't yet have a community here. She had a whole life in California, as had my dad, but because my dad is from this area, there was slightly more of a comfort zone around Huntington. So she had to have really courageous, hard conversations with herself and what she wanted and what kind of person do I want to be? And the turning point for her is when she asked herself the question, if nothing in my life changed and I stayed in California doing what I'm doing, what would my life look like in 5 years, and would I be happy about it? And when she realized that the answer was a resounding no, that she would not be pleased with doing that same thing for 5 years, she knew she had to be ready for a change, even though it was uncomfortable and scary and a lot to handle at different times, as is any transition or change. So I loved that she was honest about, some of these courageous conversations just being with ourselves. And it really does happen all the time. We all have to ask ourselves those important questions to make sure that we're staying on the right path. So moving on to Christina Johnson, again, who was the former Ohio State president, Undersecretary of Energy under Obama. she said two things that I really liked. She said, in terms of these conversations and knowing when you should even speak up and share your voice with someone, she said you should know when to hold them and when to fold them. So as if you're playing poker or whatever, gambling. And she said that's important because not every conversation is worth having, especially if the other person is not rational, is not logical, or honestly is just not in a good place right now. It might not be worth having the conversation. So be smart about it. And she said then when you do have the conversation, nothing good happens after 10 minutes. So you've probably heard the saying, most people say, nothing good happens after 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's different depending on who you hear it from. But as they say about, leave a party early before it gets crazy, same thing with these courageous conversations. Nothing good happens after 10 minutes. That's when it starts becoming a tennis match, just hitting the ball back and forth, swatting at each other. So keep it brief, keep it short, stick to your truths, stick to your story, end with the ask, and just try to wrap up that conversation within 10 minutes. So really helpful advice. Brandy Jacobs-Jones from Marshall University shared a really helpful framework. It might be one that you've heard before, but I believe she was talking about feedback, which is just one type of crucial conversation. And the framework that she shared for offering feedback to someone is called the SBI approach. So first you share the situation, then you share the behavior, and then you share the impact. So for example, it could be something like, hey, Devin, in our last meeting, where it was you, me, the whole team gathering to talk about our current project, I noticed that you were sitting back really quietly and you had your arms crossed. It looked like, you weren't having a great day, and it made the rest of the team feel like they weren't being heard when they were sharing their ideas. Okay, so that's one example. That might have been a little bit too arbitrary or subjective because maybe I was having a bad day. Maybe I just needed that. But typically try to stick to the truths. So the situation is, it was the team meeting. Everyone was sharing their ideas. The behavior is, what I said or what I did. And then the impact is maybe how it made people feel or how it negatively impacted the project, the presentation, whatever it may be. So when you share the situation, behavior, and impact, just like we learned earlier with that crucial conversations workshop, that sticking to those truths is less insulting than bringing in your subjective feelings about it. So I loved that SBI approach. And then she shared this, which was so powerful because it is so hard. She said, after you have shared your piece of the conversation, allow the silence. Practice the pause. Whew. That is so tricky for so many of us. We tend to feel uncomfortable when there's silence. We might want to just fill the space with more talking, with more ideas, with suddenly apologizing because you feel bad about what you just said. And she said the conversation will be so much more powerful when you just allow the silence. So when you end your conversation, allow the silence so that the other person can process and then come back and join the dialogue. And I can say when I heard that little nugget of wisdom, it reminded me of what I had always learned in my health coaching and life coaching training programs, which is the same thing, that as a coach, after you have asked your client a question, so something like, hey, it seems like you've tried a lot to lose a few pounds. I know that must be frustrating, but there's got to be something else you could do. What more do you think you could try? So when you end with a question like that is going to have them thinking and really contemplating what it could be for them, give them the space. And I honestly feel like most conversations are just like coaching. In coaching, you're asking questions because you're curious about the other's answer. You're listening. You're allowing for the pause. So that was Brandy's takeaway. Moving on to panelist number 4, we had Jessica Kern Huff, who of course was the basketball coach, first at Tennessee State and now high school locally. And I already shared in the main takeaways when I was going into the panelist section of this podcast, but she said 2 things that I really, really loved. She said, don't shrink yourself. She said, especially we women tend to do that. We try to make ourselves small, partially because we live in a world that thinks we should be small. And I don't necessarily mean, we live in a world that is not about women using their voices. Things have definitely changed. But even physically, there is this emphasis on keeping women small and petite and cute and sweet. And she said, don't you dare shrink yourself. Be big, be bold, be you. Whatever that looks like, just don't shrink yourself. So I loved that. I got chills. And she also said, do it scared. So if there is anything that you ever feel like you are not prepared for, or you're not qualified for, or you're just downright nervous or frightened to have the conversation, to ask for the raise, to whatever, do it anyway. Just do it scared. And I loved that because I even had a situation at the summit where that came up for me. I was eating my lunch with Cal and with his mom, Barb. And in the middle of lunch, which we were already late for because, of course, we'd been caught in the crowd. We were talking to people. And this lady who is absolutely amazing, Amy, she works with my mom on, PR stuff, media. She came over and said, hey, Devin, when you get a minute, I would love to interview you for a promo video for next year's summit. And I instantly said, okay, sounds good. I'll be over in a minute. And once I'd finished my lunch, Cal and I were walking over for me to have my interview. And he said, something that I really admire about you is that you just do things. You say yes to things even when it's scary. And he said it doesn't matter if it is a president asking you to do something scary. It doesn't even matter who's asking, but you always stand tall and say yes. And I, of course, was humbled by that compliment. I thought it was very, very sweet because it's something I try really hard to do. I think the more we say yes to opportunities, even when they scare the beep out of us, that is when we grow, and that is when we become the version of ourselves that we most want to be. In the world of manifestation, there's a lot of talk of what we call your future self. So your future self is the version of you that you want to be. It's the version of you that has the thriving entrepreneurial business and has the incredible romantic relationship, and you live in the kind of home that you've always dreamt of, whatever your future self wants to be. And Cal said to me that day that he feels like I'm really good at acting like my future self. And the reason why that is so powerful and also is just the greatest compliment I could have ever received is because when you act like your future self, you become your future self. There is suddenly no delineation between the two. And if by becoming your future self, you suddenly become more of an energetic vibrational match for everything you want, then you have suddenly started manifesting. Because to manifest anything in life, you have to vibrate at the frequency of that thing. And that sounds very woo-woo to some, but I'll give you an example. If you want to be a motivational speaker, and currently you are someone who is very shy, you don't like speaking in front of people, and you feel like you're not that courageous or confident, you're not great at faking it, you can see those two things are not a match for one another, at least not yet. But when that same shy girl starts pretending to be her future self, starts saying yes to opportunities that terrify her, she suddenly becomes worthy and capable of being that motivational speaker. So in that moment where I was asked, oh, can we interview you for a promo video? I just had to pretend that this is something I do. I'm just interviewed for videos. Okay, be right there, Amy. Thank you. So let that be a reminder for you that even when you're scared, do it anyway. Pretend to be your future self. Act like the you want to be. And before you know it, you are actually that person. The lines between who you are now and who you want to be have faded because you're already acting like them. So fake it to make it, my friends. That was Jessica Kernhuff's advice. Lastly, we had Shelly Archambault. Again, she is Fortune 500 director on boards. She's a former CEO, author, speaker, and she had a lot of really helpful nuggets. She also went to dinner with my family the night before, so I have a few more from her than I got from some of the other panelists that I just saw for that 45 minutes, but I'll share just a few of them. So one that I really, really liked that she shared on stage is that courage and confidence are the same thing. She said, it takes courage to speak up and use your voice. But now fill that in with confidence and it has the same meaning. It takes confidence to use your voice and speak up. It takes confidence to ask for the raise. It also takes courage to ask for the raise. So she said they're the same thing and they are both learned behaviors. She explained, we are flight animals. Evolutionarily, there's a reason why we have our fight or flight or flee response. It's because if you're standing in the Sahara and you see something coming towards you on the horizon and you're not sure if it's either your uncle or a tiger, whatever would be on the Sahara, it is much safer to get the heck out of Dodge than it is to stand up to that thing. So it would take courage to stand up to that thing, to stand your ground, to walk towards it. And so evolutionarily, we are trained not to have courage, not to have the confidence that, we can handle whatever's on the horizon there. No. Evolutionarily, we were trained to flee. So she brought that up because she said, if you feel right now that you are not courageous or you are not confident enough to do some of the things that you want to do or feel that you need to do, just remember, both are a muscle. They can be learned starting today. And then going back to what we were just talking about, how can these things be learned? By faking it. Fake it to make it. Pretend to be your future self. Pretend to be the version of yourself that does the scary things without batting an eye. And then one day, when you're asked to do a scary thing, you actually won't even feel the fear. You'll just be doing it because you've already been doing it. So courage and confidence are the same thing, and they're both a learned muscle. She also taught me this incredible framework for navigating through life when you have a particular goal in mind. And I like that she didn't even call it a goal, she called it a prize. So she said, after you've gotten really clear on what you want in life, ask yourself, okay, so what is this prize? So for her, she always wanted to be a CEO. So her prize was being CEO. But then here's the question you ask yourself. What needs to be true for me to get there? And she purposefully didn't say, what do I need to do? Because that's different from what needs to be true. So when I told her, for example, that I would love to, host retreats around the world at some point, she said, okay, so let's go through what needs to be true for that to happen. So just a few of them. The first one, you need to have some sort of following so that you have people willing to go on your retreat. You have to have some content that you would be willing and capable of teaching at your retreat. You would need to have a location that you maybe have a partnership with already or that you're very comfortable in so that you can host your retreat there. So you can go through a whole list, but ask yourself, once you know your prize, once you know your goal, what needs to be true for me to get there? And then make every single one happen. And she even said that in her own career journey, whenever she got a no. So whether she was in sales and she got a no, or whether she was interviewing for a job and she got a no, she would always say, okay, this is helpful information, because now she gets to ask the question, why not? And the answer to why not would give her everything she needed to know to get that prize next time. So if in sales, the client she's trying to sell to said no, and she says, why not? And they say, oh, well, the product doesn't have this kind of capability yet, and my team really needs this. Okay, great. So she's going to go to the engineering team and tell them what they need to build into the project or the product. Or let's say she's interviewing for a job and she's rejected, as many of us have been and always will be. And you say, okay, why not? And they say, well, you don't have experience in X, Y, and Z yet. You say, fabulous, I'll go and get that. So she had the idea to keep your eye on the prize, ask yourself what needs to be true, and then go and make every single one of them true. So I really, really loved that advice. And I would say those were most of the nuggets from these women. I mean, honestly, there were plenty more. I couldn't even jot them down quickly enough, but these women really left me feeling inspired. At the very end of the panel, Brandy, the one from Marshall University, even said, right now we're at the Women Warrior Summit. If you ask yourself, what is a warrior, which is what we were all born to be, a warrior is a person who is prepared to go into battle and they don't shy away from the battlefield. So when things get hard, or there's that conversation they need to have, or there's that job they're going for that they don't feel ready for yet, you stand tall, keep your chin up, and you go into battle anyway. We were all born to be warriors. So I loved that. Even saying that now just gave me chills. I absolutely loved that. And then we ended the afternoon hearing from our keynote speaker, who just happened to be actress and producer Nicole Kidman. And I'll also say that this entire event was emceed by Soledad O'Brien, who is a well-known journalist. And my goodness, she has the warmest, most dazzling personality. So at the end of the day, when you had Soledad O'Brien and Nicole Kidman going back and forth, it was quite a treat. We were definitely lucky to experience that. And Nicole also had some great tidbits of wisdom. She was talking also about what Shelley Archambault was just talking about, which is when you receive the no, when you receive the rejection. And she was saying that she always teaches her daughters, she has a 12-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old daughter, that whenever they hear no, you always think to yourself, okay, I'm going to show you. And she said, don't think that in a resentful kind of way. Think it in a powerful, confident kind of way. Like, okay, thank you. I respect the feedback. I appreciate what you have to say. I appreciate the rejection, but just you wait. And when you think that in tandem with every rejection, with every no that you hear, it kind of trains your mind to not take that rejection as a negative, but almost to fuel your inner fire. Like, okay, I'll see you next time then, and you'll see. So I absolutely adored that feedback or that wisdom. She also shared that there was a point in her life, it sounded like it was pretty recent, maybe in the past few years, where she was offered this killer role in a movie. And the producer and directors even said, Nicole, this movie will win you an Academy Award. And she was at a point in her life where she had decided that she really wanted to stay home more with the kids. She felt like her daughters needed her. She wanted to be with her daughters. And so she said no to the movie. And she said it was a really hard decision, but the only thing she had to ask herself was, what would I prefer to have at my deathbed or at my funeral? Would I prefer to be buried with an Academy Award or buried with the love of my daughters? With my daughters standing right there at my funeral, knowing that they were loved and supported and cherished and taken care of. And so she even said, that might be morbid, it might not work for everyone, but it works for me. That when I have a really difficult decision to make, ask myself, which one would I rather have at my deathbed or at my funeral or even part of my legacy? And she just had to decide. I think I would rather have, the love of my daughters and my daughters knowing that they were well cared for rather than an Academy Award. And granted, she said maybe she was able to make that choice because she had already been, privileged and honored enough to have won many awards. She'd had a beautiful, colorful career already at that point. But there comes a time when you have to make those hard choices. And sometimes it comes down to the morbid question. So I thought that was funny, but also really helpful. And I would say that's probably what I'll end with. The fact that Nicole Kidman was asking us what we want at our deathbeds. It's not what I thought I would hear at the summit, but it was everything I needed. So those were some of my main takeaways from the summit. As I mentioned, I'm really, really proud of my mom. I just felt so honored to even get to be in the same room as these women. And I don't even mean just the women on stage. I mean the 750 that were in attendance. The women that I got to meet when we were networking just blew me away. I mean, the kindness, the brilliance. As my mom had said, it is a true sisterhood. When we support one woman, we support all women. And so everything about the event was spectacular. Granted, you might say I'm biased because it was my mother's event, but I would say through an objective lens, it was absolutely remarkable. So I hope that you took something away from today's episode. I had a great time sharing it with you. I had a great time experiencing it a few days ago. And with that, I will wrap up for this week. As a reminder, if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review the podcast. Anywhere you get podcasts, you can do it on the Apple Podcast app. You can do it on Spotify. Follow me on YouTube. Subscribe, do all the things. I really, really appreciate it. I'm sending you all hugs. And I hope, as always, that you're finally starting to believe it really is all magic after all. Okay. Bye, everyone.